All right, welcome to VMware Explorer 2024, Las Vegas. It's day one, and man, we have got a lineup of great interviews, John.
I'm excited about this one because, I've been nerding out over the stats behind us on the hands-on lab, seeing how hard we're pushing some of those clusters, looking at all the efficiency, activities of vSphere live in production. And I feel like we finally got a guest who can kind of nerd out and explain, why we do what we do under the hood, so to speak.
Absolutely. And so with no further ado, let's bring on our guest, our good friend, Senior Director of Engineering, Dilpreet Bindra. Dilpreet, welcome back.
Nice to meet you.
So Dilpreet, a couple of things I'd love to talk to you about. I know you've been involved in engineering for a long time at VMware.
Very long.
Now VMware by Broadcom.
Yeah.
And I've definitely seen you working pretty heavily in Kubernetes space, but also in the raw hypervisor.
Yep.
And I noticed that you have a session this week with Chris Wolf on private AI. And for those that are watching at home, by all means, check out private AI and advanced services on VCF with Dilpreet and Chris Wolf. I'd love to hear a little bit about that, but why don't we just start about what your experiences is over the years with the hypervisor?
I've been at VMware now 18 years.
Wow.
18 years. So
John was in high school 18 years ago.
I started with ESX and worked on some of the foundational things in the kernel, and then worked on vMotion, storage vMotion.
Wow.
Then moved on to vCenter and spent almost a decade in vCenter and making sure vCenter is right. And so right now what I'm focused on is workloads, right? And how do we deliver a cloud-like experience to our various users, developers, and others alike, and make sure that we can actually give them the set of tools that they require to be able to work on, be able to deliver the value that they need for their business, right? And so, this private AI is pretty killer. I'm pretty impressed with what we've been able to do, and it allows us to, deliver another class of workload and deliver it with all the simplicity, the core values that VMware is founded on, specifically resource management. And so when we get into those questions, we'll get in a little bit into resource management and how that works for GPUs.
Absolutely.
Right?
So I guess on that note, what is similar and what is different of managing resource utilization on a CPU versus a GPU?
That's a great question. With GPUs, with CPUs, you've been dealing with, we have a virtual CPU construct that abstracts away the entire physical CPU from you. And what that means is that you can actually have overcommit on your CPUs that for n number of vCPUs, you can have a smaller number of cores or pCPUs. And so you get this massive consolidation of your overall CPU utilization, right? And on GPUs, you can't do that kind of time slicing or so on and schedule onto the GPU the same way you do on the CPU. And with GPUs, you essentially get, with NVIDIA's vGPU capability, you get vGPU slots that you can actually utilize to be able to give to workloads that need GPU of varying capacity.
Are those slots tied to CUDA cores, or are those slots tied to memory? What's that?
They're based on memory,
okay.
and it's really divvying up the GPU memory between the various workloads you have. But as you can tell, scheduling one CPUs is very, very different than scheduling GPUs.
Yeah, because on CPUs I might overcommit conservatively, maybe 3-to-1.
Yeah.
At a normal environment, we might push 5-to-1. VDI test have 10-to-1. You can go pretty wild with that. This sounds like it's a very different resource game.
No, it totally is. It's also very interesting because you eventually you as an administrator has to figure out okay, what's the sizes of application that I'm going to slot in?
Yeah, because if you're hard reserving memory slots, you need to get those slots the right size and map. You've got the marbles, raining down above you, and you're trying to make sure the buckets are the right size for them all.
Otherwise, you get this massive fragmentation, right? And
those things are really expensive.
Very
so having
expensive.
them sit idle is,
Yeah, and this is an industry-wide problem right now, and we're taking a very nice, interesting spin on it to be able to do resource scheduling on top of GPUs. So that's going to be in our talk with me and Chris.
Nice. So when you're looking at something like trying to take advantage of AI inside of an environment, and you look at the hypervisor that we have in vSphere, does it become like an assistant or a hindrance? Like, do you look at that and go like, wow, we can now lean on the labor of previous years? Are there things that you look at, or is it like, I'm trying to imagine another, like someone else that doesn't have all these things that are already built into vSphere and what that might look like?
Yeah, we've spent so much time and energy over the years on our resource management, right? We have our foundational capabilities inside of our hypervisor to be able to schedule onto CPUs, and then we have DRS that allows us to be able to schedule across in a cluster, and eventually, maybe across clusters.
Ooh.
Right? And so, like, when you have those foundational capability, it's very easy to then think about how you can go leverage it, even though it's a very dynamically different environment. You can still take all that learning that you have for CPUs over. We were talking about consolidation ratios. Mm-hmm. Our hypervisor is there's no, people have been around, hypervisors have been around for 2 decades, maybe more, and people think it's commodity now. There's just no way. Like, are you kidding me? Like, anybody that ever ventured into replacing their ESX with some other hypervisor can tell you that their cost of doing business goes up dramatically.
The consolidation ratios.
Yeah, their overall
worse.
TCO is shot at that point, right? That consolidation ratio makes a huge difference, but also the resource scheduling on top to be able to make sure your workloads are happy.
When you look at the hardware that people are deploying today, that hardware cost. I was talking to a customer. They're buying a new host. They have $50,000 of RAM going into that host. It's not CPUs. It's not anything else. Yeah. And even in like a moderate-sized host, your VCF software cost might be 20% of that host. You can kind of argue about that. But when you start looking at replacing multiple hosts with better consolidation ratios, it's
makes a huge difference, right? You could save like 30% on your overall hardware costs.
And we have these GPUs where the costs are eye-watering more. It's like, I can buy a Picasso or I can buy a stack of GPUs. And I'm not, showing shade at NVIDIA. They're worth it, but that's assuming you can get a hold of them also.
And the worst thing for any IT professional is like, hey, I have underutilized GPUs sitting in the environment. And one, either I don't know it because I don't have the telemetry.
Right, not monitoring,
right? And two, I'm wasting certain capacity because of the way I chose to break this capacity up.
The management.
I think when hosts were a couple $1,000s and, it's like, okay, I've got 5,000. Having an extra host or two, like, you could have that flex in the budget, and it didn't feel like you were wasting something. But I was talking to a customer now about pushing memory consolidation farther, playing around with some of the NVMe tier, and they were talking about saving millions just off of better density. It's a completely different conversation, especially as we go further and further along this age of accelerators, right? Yeah.
It's really pushing that, like, why your hypervisor is so important.
Yeah.
The other thing is, like, a lot of customers think that they can go bare metal. Well, good luck with that. Like, how are you going to manage your environment? Now
operationally you have monitoring. You have to just bring in disparate tools.
Now you have a bunch of pets lying around. And you got to go and care and feed for that pet in a very particular way. Well, if you want to manage the security of what's going on there, or the compliance, or the
a separate silo for each. That's for farmers, not for
that's another
admins.
pet.
So.
And you got to learn a whole other thing. Well, we give you all that value, and you get to do it on a stack you know and love.
Right.
Yeah,
that's been tested in overtime, and you're familiar with. And now I know this is something that you've worked on extensively, but the fact that Kubernetes is now natively inside of vSphere, like, what does that mean to customers that are in the Kubernetes space?
Yeah, when it comes to applications and the big transformation, we've been working on Kubernetes for like at least 5 years. The big transformation is, like, most app teams are using Kubernetes as their base foundational capability for any of their applications. And, if you look at our Kubernetes service, we've been through various bumps in the road, but now we have a Kubernetes service that's bar none. right? With 802.3, now you get asynchronous delivery of your Kubernetes versions.
Yeah, you can run ahead or behind on that version based on your application or developer needs without having to tie the infrastructure upgrade cycle to it.
Exactly, and we had a challenge of catching up on our upstream Kubernetes releases. And now we're way ahead. We actually jumped ahead of a bunch of clouds and other on-prem deployments. But
developers do not want to be tied to the vSphere lifecycle version. I mean,
that goes completely against the mindset of Kubernetes that wants to upgrade fast. So I can't wait for the next version of vSphere.
It's built into VCF.
Yeah.
Well, what I like here is we've reached the point, going through the hype cycle of Kubernetes, where I don't think we're going to be counting how many times they say Kubernetes in the keynote. But we're talking about really boring things like lifecycle optimization. And this is when the grown-ups are using a platform at scale.
Yes. No, I think we've done a phenomenal job in delivering an enterprise class Kubernetes service that you get for free.
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's just built inside of VCF. I love it. Well, I know you're here all week, and I know you've got that session with Chris Wolf, Private AI and Advanced Services on VCF, but tell me anything else that's top of mind for you this week at Explore.
It's been great talking to all the customers that we've talked to, and our story, we've spent a lot of time, post-acquisition, working on how to integrate into one product, and, the message is resonating. It's great to hear from customers, they feel the compelling value. You talk to them about another how we're trying to deliver a real cloud experience, and their eyes light up. Really, I can do this with my customers. I can break them up into tenants, and I can give them their own capacity.
Multi-tenancy everywhere. I love it. So.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Dilpreet, I appreciate you taking time to talk with John and myself, and enjoy the rest of your Explore.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.